welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my June wrap up. I read 27 books and then another one that I DNF'd around like 40%, I think. I've organized them in categories, which I don't normally do, but I thought I would organize them in categories. So I have magical realism / fantasy, thrillers, romance, graphic novels, and then general fiction like miscellaneous. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about each one just because I don't want us to all be here forever. So let's just get started. So I think the first category I'm going to do is romance. So I read 4 romance books. There are a few that are romance in magical realism and then a couple in the miscellaneous pile that have a small romance subplot, but for straight romance I have 4. Done and dusted, and this one was my first cowboy romance and I loved this one so much. I really did not think I was going to be a cowboy romance girly, but I was absolutely obsessed with this and I can't wait to read the sequel. There's a 3rd one coming out soon as well, so I'm just really excited for those 2. I definitely picked it up because of the cover, not really expecting to love the story, but I actually really loved it. So in this one we have our main character Emmy, and she comes from a very small town. Her family owns like a really big ranch farm thing, and she went off to college. She wanted to like get out of her small town, and then she made a career out of riding horses and competing. Then after an accident she ends up going back to her small town just to kind of like recuperate, and she's mentally like not handling the accident very well. So when she goes back she runs into her brother's best friend Luke, and they have been friends for a very long time since they were kids. Emmy and Luke like never really got along very well, so she's like not super excited to see him. Everything just kind of goes from there. It's not very long, like it's definitely worth the read in my opinion. If you like romance, if you are hesitant about cowboy romance, I would definitely start with this one just because there is that Elsie Silver series, but the books seem to be way longer than this one, so that's why I started with this one instead. This one I gave 4.25 stars. The next one I have is Late Bloomer, and this one I gave 4.5 stars. I loved this book so much. We have our main characters Opal and Pepper. Opal is kind of like a lost soul. She's an artist and she is always kind of just like feeling unsettled and she doesn't really have it all together. One day she wins the lottery. I think she gets like $500,000, I'm pretty sure. And she decides to buy a flower farm in kind of the middle of nowhere. However, when she gets there, Pepper lives there and was unaware that her estranged mother had sold the farm to Opal. They definitely butt heads. They're pretty much opposites, but they have to kind of come together for a variety of reasons. This one is just so cute. I absolutely loved it. There's a lot of good like mental health representation in this one and like neurodivergence. I just loved it. The next 2 I read are from like the same series. So it's It Happened One Summer and then Hook, Line, and Sinker. I loved these ones so much. When I finished It Happened One Summer, I already had Hook, Line, and Sinker from the library, and I did not think I would like Hook, Line, and Sinker as much as the first one. I was like, there's no way I'm going to like it as much as that one, but I actually liked it more. I gave It Happened One Summer 4 stars, and then I gave Hook, Line, and Sinker 4.5 stars. I'm not going to go into Hook, Line, and Sinker just in case of spoilers. In It Happened One Summer, we have our main character Piper, and she lives in LA. She's a socialite. She has a ton of family money. After a ton of like bad decisions, reckless behavior, her stepdad sends her to this very small town in Washington. It's like a fishing town. It's very small, and there's a reason why he sends her to this specific town, but I don't want to get into it too much. I think if it's not in the synopsis, it's fun to like find that out. Piper then meets Brendan, and he's the captain of the main fishing ship in the town. They are definitely opposites. They butt heads completely and totally. He doesn't really like respect her at all. Like he thinks she's just some airhead socialite come to ruffle feathers. And then, at the risk of saying this a million times in this video, it just kind of goes from there. I loved it so much. It's definitely worth the hype. I had been wanting to read this for a while just because everyone talks about these 2 so much, and so I'm very happy that I finally read them, and I would really recommend them if you like romance, like companion series. So I think the next category will be thrillers. I read Lenny Marks Gets Away with Murder, and this one I gave 4.5 stars. So in this one we have our main character Lenny, and she has a very strict routine and way of doing things that she doesn't like to stray from. She has her like special interests, and she isn't really interested in like having friends or getting to know people. She also doesn't remember what happened when one day her stepdad and her mom disappeared when she was younger. She was a kid, and just one day they weren't there anymore. Then after that, she lived with her grandma and then foster care, I believe. One day, as an adult now, she gets a letter from the parole board and she doesn't want to open it. She's definitely ignoring it. She doesn't know what's inside, but she just doesn't want to open it. So she's ignoring it, and then finally she gets a call from the person trying to contact her from the parole board, and then the person says like, someone's getting out and we think you should know. This one was very similar to Strange Sally Diamond, which I read last year, and I loved it. It was one of my favorite books of the year. This one is very similar in that Lenny Marks has a ton in common with Sally Diamond. So if you have read Strange Sally Diamond and you liked it, you would most likely really like this one as well. I also read Riley Sager's new book, which is Middle of the Night, and this one I was so excited for. I always really like Riley Sager's books, with the exception of two. One I really didn't like, and then Across the Lake was just like okay for me. And this one was interesting because it was the first time that Riley Sager had like a male point of view, like a male main character. And so I was really interested to see how that would go, because he normally just always has women. This one I really don't want to say anything about just because I don't want to say any spoilers, and I really do think it's going to be super interesting and super fun to go in knowing as little as possible. There's multiple timelines, there's flashbacks, and I can't remember if there's different points of view, but I really like this one. I'm happy that it wasn't a disappointment. I didn't love it as much as I was hoping I would, but it definitely wasn't bad, and it wasn't a big disappointment. I also read The Next Mrs. Parrish, and this one is a sequel to The Last Mrs. Parrish. I don't really want to get into this one at all just because it is the sequel, but I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. I felt like the pacing was a little bit weird. There was times where it kind of dragged on and I found myself wanting to skim it. And I'm not sure how long it was, but it definitely felt like it could have been shorter. However, if you've read The Last Mrs. Parrish, I would definitely recommend picking up the sequel. So the next one I read was The Haters by Robin Harding, and this one was just a little bit kind of annoying. Our main character was super annoying at times, but basically it's an author and she publishes her first novel. However, then she starts getting like review bombed by this one person. She's getting contacted by them. They're basically threatening her. They're constantly just like kind of stalking her and threatening her and trying to basically sabotage her whole life and her friends and family's lives as well. It's interesting because you don't really know who to trust, and you're also kind of like, is our main character an unreliable narrator? You just don't really know the whole time you're reading. Like, well, at least I didn't. Like, I had no idea who it could be. I had some like theories, but I really wasn't confident in any of them. It was interesting because I didn't realize that Robin Harding, the author, is from Vancouver. So a large majority of this book was set in Vancouver, which is where I'm from. So that was really fun to read about. I did have really high expectations for this one following The Drowning Woman, just because of how much I love The Drowning Woman. This one didn't totally meet my expectations, but it wasn't bad by any means, and I did really enjoy it. Another one that I read is The Locked Door by Frida McFadden, and this one I gave 3.5 stars, but I would definitely knock that down to 3 just because the more that I've sat with it, I don't really care about it very much. Like, I didn't love it. It was just kind of okay. We have our main character Nora, and when she was growing up, she found out that her dad was a serial killer and he was keeping like his victims locked in the basement, and he was also like doing a bunch of stuff to them like after he killed them. So he had the nickname the Handyman. I'm not gonna go into that, but that's what that is. Nora, our main character, was just like super annoying and irritating for a large majority of it. Basically what happens is her dad is still in prison, but there's a copycat going around, and it seems like they're kind of framing Nora, or at least like very intensely trying to get her attention. They're mostly targeting her previous patients because she's a surgeon, and yeah, I don't know. It sounds super interesting, at least from the synopsis. I don't know if what I'm saying sounds interesting, but it definitely kind of fell flat for me. Like 3 stars is generous. It's a generous 3 stars. I also read The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley, and this one I really liked. I liked her previous books, The Guest List and The Hunting Party. I hated The Paris Apartment so much, and this one is definitely more reminiscent of The Guest List and The Hunting Party completely, and doesn't really have anything in common with The Paris Apartment. This one has like multiple timelines, flashbacks, a ton of different points of view like she normally does. I actually don't really want to say too much about this. Like, you can read the synopsis if you want, but I would recommend going into this like pretty much not knowing anything. I read the synopsis just because when I found out that she was coming out with a new book, I was super excited for it. So I looked it up and everything, but I would recommend, if you can, go into this one pretty much not knowing anything. This one I gave 4 stars. And it seems small, but I would probably bump that up to 4.25 just because sitting on it, like I am still really happy about it and like still thinking about it. I know that like the 0.25, 0.75, and sometimes even the 0.5 like doesn't sit well with people because it just seems like so minuscule and dumb. But for me, the difference between a 4 and a 4.25 is pretty big, so I would definitely give it a 4.25. The last thriller I have is Such a Bad Influence, and this one I gave 3 stars. So we have our main character, and her sister goes missing. Her sister has been an influencer pretty much her whole life. She started out as part of like her mom's family vlogging situation, and then as she's gotten older, she's branched off into her own little like influencer business. And one day she just kind of goes missing, and everyone's just like extremely concerned. As you're reading this and kind of once you're done, it definitely leaves you with more thoughts on the influencer industry as a whole, especially family vlogging with kids. But it definitely leaves you with a lot of things to think about regarding just like both of those industries. Our main character Hazel is the sister of the influencer that goes missing, Evie, and she's 7 years older than her. She's never really been a part of the family vlogging because she was in her teens and she was just like, I don't want to be a part of that. And then she moved out and went to school as her sister was kind of coming into her own and becoming this like teen influencer. There's a ton of sketchy people around, and her mom is just wild. She's unhinged, which actually made for a really interesting character. I think I even might bump this to like a 3.5 just because I did really like the messaging in this one, and I feel like for a thriller it actually did have like a lot of important concepts in it for like people to think about. So probably 3.5, maybe even like a 4. So the next category is fantasy / magical realism, and the one I want to start with first is When the Moon Hatched, and this one I loved. I think I gave this one 4.5 stars. I absolutely love fantasy books with dragons. Like there's a high chance I'm gonna like it if it has dragons. So I knew going into this I was probably really going to love it, and it definitely didn't disappoint. I devoured this book. I read it so quickly, especially for like how thick it is. Like I just couldn't stop reading it. I did not want to put it down. I cannot wait for the sequel. It's a fantasy romance, and our main character Rave, I think that's how you say it, she's an assassin for the rebellion group against like the kingdom, and there's a few different realms. Or yeah, I think. Yeah. And she doesn't really know much about any of the other ones other than what she's heard. So this one definitely has a lot of adventure and like exploration. She kind of like finds herself more, like she comes into her own. She's learning more about her past and just like about who she is. I really love this one. I feel like the dragon system and like the world building in general, but also surrounding the dragons, is pretty unique. I've never read anything similar, so I love this one. I also read A Novel Love Story, and this one is Ashley Poston's new one, and this one I gave 3.5 stars, which made me so sad. I absolutely love The 7-Year Slip, 5 stars. I loved The Dead Romantics. I think that one was like 4.5 stars. I loved those ones so much, so I had such high expectations for A Novel Love Story, especially because it's a book about books, basically. Our main character, her favorite book series is a cozy mystery series. And then one day she's able to like be transported into the world of this book. She's like in the town, all the characters are there as like real people. So we kind of just see her living amongst these characters come to life that she knows already through reading the books, but obviously they don't know her. She's just some random stranger that came to town. She's leaving once her car is fixed, and yeah, so I'm disappointed by this one. It's not bad. Like 3.5 stars is not a bad rating for me. Like a 3-star book is still like okay, and I would recommend it depending on the person, but I was disappointed just because of how much I loved her other ones and how much I was looking forward to this one. I also read From Bad to Cursed, which is the sequel to Payback's a Witch, and I really like this one. The series is basically like witchy rom-coms surrounding these 4 magic families that live in a small town, Thistle Grove, I believe it's called. And then this book follows a different character from one of the other families than the first one. And it's really interesting. It's not just like a simple witchy rom-com. There's definitely like world building for the different families. Like each of the 4 families has a different like magical ability, and then different characters within each family have like their own affinities and abilities and what they excel in. I really like this series. It's different from the X-Hex because I feel like the X-Hex is definitely more fluffy and just like straight rom-com, whereas this one's a little bit more complex but still very simple to follow. It's definitely still like a fluffy and fun read, but it is more complex and like has more depth to it than your typical like witchy to rom-com. So this one I gave 4 stars, and then I read the one that comes after this, the third one, which is called Back in a Spell, which I gave 3 stars. So this one was like a little annoying. I feel like the characters were just like irritating. It was kind of just like a big disappointment compared to the first 2, but on its own, like, it wasn't a bad book. I just didn't like it as much as the first 2, and right now I'm reading the 4th, and I am liking that one more than the 3rd, but just barely. I think the first 2 are definitely like the best ones, which isn't uncommon. I also read Half-Blood, and this one came out like, I want to say over 10 years ago, but I think it's being like republished. And this one, I don't even want to talk about. I did not like this one pretty much at all. I don't even really know what to say about it. I won't be continuing the series. I just did not like this at all. The next one I read is Annie LeBlanc is Not Dead Yet. And this one on the back says it's Gilmore Girls meets The Twilight Zone. Every 10 years in the strange little town of London, California, one person is chosen to return from the dead. This one I really liked. It's a fun YA. It's a fun, like, found family, coming of age. The magical realism spin is so cool. It's a small town, and they have this, like, raffle, so the person that wins can choose who they want to bring back from the dead for a limited amount of time. I think it's like a month, and then they have to go back. This one I gave 4 stars, and I would really recommend it. If you like YA, if you like magical realism, I would highly recommend this one. And the last one for this category is Powerful, and this one is a novella following Powerless. And in Powerless, we have our main character, Peyton, and she has a best friend named Adina. So in this one, we follow Adina, and it's parallel to what's happening in Powerless. Like, a lot of people now are doing tandem reads of Powerless and Powerful at the same time. I loved this one so much more than I thought I would. It's so short, like, it's a novella. It's so cute. It's so good. If you know the ending of Powerless, then you kind of know where this one's headed. I just really like this one. So the next category I have is just kind of miscellaneous, and there's 4 books for this one. The first one is The Last Chance Library, and I absolutely love this. It's set in a very small little, like, English village town, and our main character is June. She's a librarian, and she's very lonely. So at the beginning of this, we just kind of see June dealing with her coworkers, as well as just like her day-to-day at the library and her patrons, and just seeing how much a library really helps the community and how it really helps out individuals in the community for different things other than just books. We find out that the council wants to shut down the branch of the library, and then the closest one will be an hour away. When you're reading this, you can see how it would be detrimental to the people in the community, just because we have met them through June. We know about them. You're invested in their lives. You're invested in June. I found myself really invested in the community, just like not losing the library. So I really like this. I gave it 4 stars, but I would probably bump it up to 4.5 just because of how much I really liked it, and I want to check out this author's backlist. The next one is The Art of Murder, and this is a cozy mystery also set in a very small little English village. I gave this one 3 stars. It was also a generous 3. I didn't love it. I found myself like not really reaching for it too often, not wanting to pick it up too much as I was reading it. However, once I was reading it, like, it kept my attention, but once I put it down, like, I found it hard to want to pick back up. We have our 2 main characters who are both middle-aged women, like past their prime, or so they feel, and obviously it's a cozy mystery, so like a murder happens in town. They both feel the need to kind of like look into it themselves. We also see into like their personal lives, so it's definitely a bit more in-depth than a typical cozy mystery. I just didn't love it as much as I normally love cozy mysteries. The next one I have, I'm kind of nervous to share my rating, and that is my first Ellen Hildebrand, and it's The Hotel Nantucket. This one I gave 2.5 stars. I just like did not like this one very much at all. I would still definitely give her other books a chance. I just didn't love this one, but it wasn't like badly written. I just don't think I connected with the story at all. I just found myself not caring about the story. I didn't care how it ended. I didn't care what happened to the characters. I didn't care about like any of it. But again, it wasn't badly written. I would still definitely read more from this author and give her another chance to see if like I like her books. It's basically about this haunted hotel in Nantucket. Nobody really realizes that it's haunted, and yeah, I don't know. I just didn't love this one. It also just like dragged. I don't know. I just really didn't like this one. Lastly, I read The Newcomer, and this one I gave 3 stars. This one was actually very cute. This was not a generous 3 stars. This was like a good 3 stars. We have our main character, Letty, and after she discovers her sister Tanya like murdered on the floor, she takes her toddler niece and makes a run for it. She's pretty sure that her sister's ex-husband is the one that did it, or at least arranged for it. He's very wealthy. So she runs off to the small town in Florida and stays at a motel. It's here that you kind of see her like meet a bunch of new people. She's kind of discovering herself as well as this potential new normal while trying to keep her niece safe from her ex-brother-in-law. At the same time, she's trying to like solve the mystery of what happened to her sister and why. She's also learning more about her sister's past, which is like sketchy at best. So this one, yeah, was a good 3 stars. I liked it and I would definitely read more from this author. Lastly, I just have 4 graphic novels which I'll go over pretty quickly. The first one is Spirited, The Day of the Living Live. And in this one we have our main character Liv, and she moves to a new town with her parents, and it's very creepy, very spooky. She goes to her first day of school and realizes that like everyone's either a ghost or like a vampire, werewolf, like there's some sort of paranormal aspect to every other student and teacher at this school, and actually in this whole town. She's always been able to see ghosts, so it's not really a problem for her, but she's not really feeling like she fits in. It's a really cute story about like not really changing who you are to want to fit in. I would really highly recommend this to parents of kids in elementary school or like middle school. Following that paranormal graphic novel, I also have Ghost Book, and this one was really cute. It was also kind of sad. I did not expect to cry reading this one, but it was very good. I really liked it. And this one we have a main character July, and she can see ghosts. However, her dad says like they don't exist and she's basically making it up. So she doesn't really talk about it. She pretends like it's not happening. However, that becomes increasingly difficult when it becomes the Hungry Ghost Month, which is when the gates of the underworld are open. Ghosts are just kind of like flooding in. It is definitely more complex. The storytelling is really cool. There's mysteries that she has to solve, and she meets some friends, and she goes on a lot of adventures, and I was really pleasantly surprised by this one. Next, I have Lightfall, and this one is the first in a series. I have the second one right now, and then I think the third is coming out soon. It's truly just like a fantasy adventure graphic novel. We have our main character B, and she was adopted by her grandfather, who is also a pig wizard. Like he is a pig and he's a wizard. So she was adopted by him as a baby when her parents pass away. And he's also experiencing like a ton of memory loss. So one day she gets home and there's a little note from him that says he's like left for some reason, but he is coming back and he doesn't want her to go after him. However, she's like, okay, well, he is always confused and doesn't really remember things. So it's not very safe for him to be going out on his own. So she goes after him and she meets a friend along the way. And it's just like a very cute story. I'm really excited to read the sequel and kind of see how the story progresses. And then lastly, I have Pillow of the Woods, and this one is very short but packs like a pretty big punch. We have Willow, and she's a lot of trouble managing her emotions, mostly anger and just like outbursts. She loves the woods. Her mom had recently passed away, and she always goes to the woods where her dad has taken her a bunch of times to study like plants and all that stuff. So she goes there when she's feeling overwhelmed or angry, etc. And then one day she meets Pilu, who is a lost tree sprite, I believe, and she has to help Pilu find her way home. It's really, really cute. It has a lot of good messaging for kids that are dealing with maybe like anger or outbursts or just like a lot of emotions that they don't know how to deal with, and I would really recommend this one. Okay, so that is my June wrap up. I know it was probably long just based on the amount of time that I've been filming. So if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I did have a really good reading month in June. I did enjoy the majority of them, and I'm really happy about that. I definitely am aiming to read less in July. I feel like I read too much in June, and I didn't even force myself to like read as much as I could just for the numbers. I just found that like I was just really anxious, and I've talked about this before, but reading is like my biggest coping mechanism. So reading 27 or 26, 28, I forget how many books in a month is like very indicative of how I'm doing mentally. So I'm definitely aiming to hopefully read less in June. And yeah, so I will see you guys again soon. Bye.